Hi everyone. I just want to make sure you can hear me first. Can you just type and say whether or not you can hear me now? Cool, we're all good. Right. So, thank you very much. Right, let's get started then. Hi, right, Ellen, Dylan, Will. Okay, cool. Good. I, nice, thanks guys. Right, so let's get started. Um, So, what I wanted to do today, guys, was kind of break today down into a few sections. So I want to talk about what you should do before the exam. We're going to look at all four questions and how to approach them. And then if we've got time at the end, maybe we'll do a little bit of Q&A. Okay, so I wanted to start off by just doing what you should have been doing an awful lot already, which is looking at the preliminary materials. So here's a copy of it. There you go. There's a copy of it. And you should have really been reading this to the point where you know it back to front now anyway. But what I want to do first off is just go through it with you because tomorrow before the exam, and certainly with my guys, we'll be doing this immediately before the exam, is to just read it one more time. Because these preliminary materials are literally littered with clues as to what to expect, but also it's your brief as to exactly how to get marks, okay? So let's just have a quick look now at what it actually says and what it actually means. Okay, so the serial box is looking for new content. We want your ideas for an original hashtag serial drama, television serial drama. Now, I think that's important already, the fact that they're using Twitter. This gives you an idea as the kind of marketing they're after, and the fact that this is very much an online program as opposed to like an offline program. So later on when we talk about kind of like your digital marketing campaigns, it's really important that you are clued up on hashtags, what your unique hashtag would be, stuff like that. It's very much a 21st century serial drama. Okay, so it goes on to say, the serial box wants your pitches for new original serial drama. Okay, the only thing I'd say about that is your client, the person you're pitching to, is called the serial box. Okay, now that's really important because throughout you need to kind of like approach this as though it is a real pitch, and you're not just writing an exam. You're pitching to the serial box, so you must address it to the serial box. You can write about we think in terms of like write about yourself as a production company. So that's really important as well. So let's move on. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like looking at questions a little bit as well. I'll answer all of your questions at the end, guys, as many as I can anyway. But we are going to, we're just going to fly through this as quick as we can. So the next part it says, the serial box has made its name as an internet TV streaming provider that focuses on great serial drama. Since we launched the service, we have concentrated on providing a wide selection of serial TV drama available to stream on all your devices. Now again, how are you going to use this? When you are writing any of your answers for any of the questions, you've almost got to think of this less as an exam and more as you and everyone else in the country doing this exam is pitching and they can only pick one of them. So if this was a real client, how are you going to reassure them that you have really thought about everything they've said? Now there at the end, when they've said available to stream on all of your devices, you could maybe say about how your show, when you're talking about question 2, is only going to be about 20 minutes long. You want short episodes because a lot of people obviously watch on their devices on the bus or whatever. So that's an example of how you could use information from the brief in your answer, which really shows that you're considering stuff. Where are we? Next paragraph. Now it's time to move away from content curation to content creation. We want to grow our audience and position our brand as market leaders for quality serial drama. Here is your chance to get involved. We are looking to commission several new original serial dramas. We are open to suggestions from any subgenre. Now let's stop there because that's a really important point. Any subgenre. So this is a wide open brief. They'll accept like a crime, a hospital, a sci-fi. That's really exciting because at the end of the day, I don't suppose it matters what subgenre it is. If it feels like a drama, it's going to follow some of those conventions like it's primarily about relationships and there's going to be conflict and it's about the human struggle. You know, so that's what they want to see. As long as you can create something which feels like a drama, then you're doing the right thing. The cereal box is tired of the same old stereotypical representations of young people, so it is important that your serial drama gives a realistic and relevant representation of teenagers. That's really important because what is a stereotypical teenage representation? I would say it's going to be the jocks, or the cool the cool, attractive, popular girl who's actually really mean. Those are stereotypes, and they're kind of boring. So if you think about shows like End of the Effing World, or 13 Reasons Why, these are TV shows which have got really, really unique characters, you know. So think about your characters, what you can do to make them feel less generic, you know. Is your main character transgender or disabled? Or could you have a character who's like from a less represented kind of social group? And that would be really interesting, I think. Right, where were we? Next paragraph. Whichever subgenre you choose, you should create characters, storylines, and situations that a teenage audience will engage with. Now, I've had loads and loads of questions. I've had loads of questions about this particular point over the last week or so, of people saying, what's the difference between a storyline and a situation? And I think that's an interesting point, because I wouldn't be surprised if that exact wording comes up in question 1 or 2, where you have the bullet points. I wouldn't be surprised if it says storylines, situations, and characters. So what's the difference? I think a situation is really the scenario, the world, or the setting that the show's based in. The storyline is literally what happens. So to give you an example, if we were looking at The Walking Dead, the situation is people trying not to get killed by zombies in post-apocalyptic America. That's the situation. Storyline is a bit more specific as to what happens, in terms of a character called Rick is trying to keep a group alive as they travel from place to place looking for a safe haven. So think of situation as the scenario, the broad setting that you're creating, and think of storyline as slightly more specific in terms of like the narrative and what happens. Overall, we want serial drama that is creative, imaginative, and above all, entertaining. Okay. As you know, the way that audiences watch serial drama has changed over the years, but we believe the reasons audiences enjoy serial dramas remain largely the same. I think that's probably the wording they're going to use for question 1. I think they're going to say serial dramas remain popular with audiences. Using your own examples, please consider how characters, settings, and scenarios contribute to this. I think that's kind of the sort of thing that we're looking for. Okay, where are we? You will need to research serial television drama and be able to explain why it is so popular with audiences. Again, this is a question I've had absolutely loads over the last week. People have been saying, do the texts that I've been studying for question 1, do they have to be teen dramas? And the answer is no, they're not. I actually had the privilege of speaking to an examiner on this one. And I asked that question as well. But no, for question 1, they just want to see that you understand the conventions of drama as a whole. So question 2, 3, and 4 are going to be a bit more specific to teen dramas. But don't worry, if you've studied, I think I had one question, it was like, is it okay if I've studied Game of Thrones and Walking Dead, or 18 plus kind of dramas? Yes, that's absolutely fine. If you've studied a teen drama, then that's great. But don't worry. Because you'd have been expected to start studying your dramas, your case studies, long before they release the preliminary materials. So don't worry about that. Then there's one paragraph left. We would also like your ideas about how we can generate interest online for your serial television drama. We intend to have an extensive pre-launch digital marketing campaign to promote the shows before they are released. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to question 4. But I think the fact they've written this, it's almost certainly going to come up in the exam. So a pre-launch digital marketing campaign. What exactly is that? Pre-launch, in terms of all of the build-up to the actual release date. digital marketing. So we're not talking about billboards, and we're not talking about like TV trailers or sides of buses. That's very old school. What they're looking at is quite 21st century digital marketing in terms of, you know, using hashtags, synergy with apps like Snapchat, where you can have like photo filters, or I don't know, like an interactive website. That's what they mean by digital marketing. And the fact that they say a pre-launch digital marketing campaign, I think they're going to want to know the big picture in terms of how everything's going to be released over a course of several weeks before the launch of the show. So not just a case of like, well, I'd have a trailer, I'd have a hashtag, and I'd have a mobile app. I think they'd want to know, like, strategically, how would you do this? So 4 weeks before launch, I'd start off with a very kind of cryptic teaser. It might just be kind of like, you know, it might be a trailer which doesn't actually have any footage, but it just has kind of like sound effects or something which creates an awful lot of intrigue. Maybe a couple weeks later, you'd release the full trailer, which links to some kind of hashtag which would be used on Twitter. Maybe a week before it actually releases, you launch a mobile app which allows you to do kind of like a hide and seek type game, which will give clues to what happens in the show. I don't know, they're kind of lame ideas, but that's the kind of thing that I think you'd be looking at. Okay, where are we? I think that's all it says. Promote shows. So that's that's all it says in the preliminary materials. You need to know this really, really well. And like I say, if you use words from the preliminary material in your answer, I think that's really great as well. I think it'd be great if you could say, we believe that our idea for a show is going to be, what was their exact words? Imaginative and above all entertaining. You're using words from the preliminary materials then in your own answer. And if this was a real world scenario, it would be a case of, okay, they've really read it and they're trying to respond to our brief. You know, they want to make us happy. And I think that's really important. So, yeah, I would say before the exam, reread this. You've probably read it 100 times, but read it again because you don't want to waste any time in the exam going over this again. So, what else did we say? If we go back to contents, what else did we say? Before the exam, read the preliminary materials again. Make sure you're prepared. So, this is another question I've had an awful lot over the last week. Do I need to bring colouring pens in? It says on the front of the exam paper, make sure you bring a ruler and colouring pens and fine line and stuff like that. Is it really necessary? I've been getting asked that quite a lot. And I'd say yes, it is. Obviously, time is very, very precious, especially with the production question. But if you can add a little bit of colour, I'm not saying colour them all in, you don't have time for that. But if you can add a little bit of colour, it can show intention in terms of media language. In other words, if you give your main character a red dress and you colour it red, that's showing intention, the connotations of red, especially if you annotate it and say red dress, which connotes lust, desire, danger, femme fatale, stuff like that. I would most definitely take in some colour pencils and use them. So make sure you have all of those things, a ruler. Again, if you get asked to design a website, which is very possible with this particular exam, I think it's not going to cost you any more time to be neat and to just have nice straight lines as opposed to something which has been very hastily sketched. Fine, you're being marked on how well it responds to the brief, its creativity, your use of media language and the key concepts. But actually that little bit of polish, I don't think it actually steals too much time, and it can add to your marks. Sorry, I'm not actually answering questions right now, but I've just seen someone ask, are you allowed coloured pens? I think so. I don't know. I would take pencils personally because pens might go through the paper. And also you can't really, they're less forgiving. So I would personally, like, as a last resort maybe, but I think I'd go with pencils myself. Let's just have a quick look. How would you storyboard a title sequence? I mean, that could come up. And as long as you're very, very familiar with title sequences, that should be quite easy. Don't worry about writing everything down, but I think they would want to see, like, how soon do you have the main title? It would usually come at the end. You could pick things like, who would your institution be? So they've said it's going to be a streaming service. Make sure you put down the serial box. Who would your main actor be? You know, your choice of the main actor, whether it's Kevin Spacey, like in House of Cards, that again, that's kind of showing meaning in your intentions. Right, should we get started then? So, we've talked about before the exam. I've had a lot of questions this week about how to actually write question 1. A lot of people are like they're clued up on the case studies that they've been looking at, but they're not exactly sure how to write it. So what I thought I'd do is literally show you how I would plan and how I'd write an answer. So what I've done is somewhere. Where are we? I'll get to the next slide. I've come up with a kind of a mock paper. I've tried to make it look exactly like it's going to look tomorrow, and this is just the sort of thing that you could expect to see tomorrow. So let me read it to you because it might be too small to see on your browsers. Where are we? We believe, question 1, we believe that TV serial dramas remain popular with audiences because of relatable characters, unusual situations, and gripping storylines. How successful were the TV serial dramas you have researched in providing these? Use 2 examples of TV serial dramas from your research. So, what they want to see now is not how well you know your case studies. It's not a case of like, wow, I can reel off who the director was, and I can tell you the entire cast. I can tell you what happened for the entire first season. They're not interested so much in how well you know your case studies. It's more a case of, can you use case studies to prove how well you know TV serial dramas? Okay, so let's look at that in terms of these 3 bullet points. Relatable characters. What does a TV drama do to make characters relatable? And can you apply your case studies to that? Don't just talk about how relatable Daenerys is in Game of Thrones, or how relatable the main characters are in 13 Reasons Why. Make some points about how characters are made relatable, and then use your case studies. Likewise with unusual situations, gripping storylines. I'm gonna go to like a writing mode now, guys, and I'll show you how I would actually approach this. Okay, so let's talk about these 3 bullet points. We've got relatable characters, unusual situations, and gripping storylines. So if I was going to be doing this in a real situation, let me just try and get onto the right page here. Where are we? I'd go relatable characters, unusual situations. So, relatable characters, unusual situations, and what was it? Gripping storylines. Now, if I was in the exam, I would start off by just taking a couple of minutes to plan how you would approach each of these bullet points. Now, what do you actually know about relatable characters in TV serial dramas? How do they make them relatable? Well, what could we talk about? We could talk about the fact that they have character arcs, and if you've watched some of my other videos in the series in preparation for this exam, you'll know that like character arcs are really important. They can make a character relatable, and we really feel like they go on a journey. So that's something we could write about in terms of, you know, our media knowledge of dramas. What else makes them relatable? Well, we talked a little bit about props, character types. So you might want to say about, you know, we like relating to a hero. We like having a sidekick. Maybe there's someone that you associate with, and that way you're getting to use a little bit of media theory there. What else can we say about? We've talked a little bit about characters having flaws, because no one's perfect, and I think everyone likes, you know, a hero who's not perfect. So can you talk about that at all? Let's think about some of the other ones here. So they want to know about unusual situations. So we could say, in terms of a TV drama, very often they will talk about familiar characters in unfamiliar situations. We could talk about places usually off access to people. You know, so I think a great example of that would be like House of Cards. The fact that we get to see inside the White House. That's something we don't usually see. Again, very often it can be something fantastical. So for the likes of, you know, a sci-fi or something based in Westeros, that's something that works and makes an unusual situation. And the last part is gripping storylines. What could we write about for gripping storylines? How do TV dramas actually work? Well, I think it's important we write about story arcs, because very often we'll have, you know, we'll have a story which spans a single episode, but then we'll also very often we'll have a story that spans an entire season. So it's really important we write about that. Obviously, it's very, very easy to talk about Todorov there. And we can talk about narratology. And again, that's just a really, really, really easy opportunity there to just talk about a bit of media theory. So that's kind of how I would just plan out my answer. And it really wouldn't take you that long to plan something like this. I think that would be a good idea. Now I'm going to have a go at... I've not planned this. I honestly haven't planned this. So it's probably going to be a bit garbage. But I'm going to have a go at actually writing a question one answer with you watching. I'm just going to show you my thought process, okay? So, let me see. If I just go back to where I was writing there. I'm just going to move this down so I can just write above it ever so slightly. There we go. So, I've said relatable characters. They want to know what makes a TV drama so appealing to the audience. What actually makes it appeal to the audience? So, I'm going to start off by actually addressing the client, who, as we know, is Cereal Box. So, we can start with Dear Cereal Box. Firstly, let me thank you for allowing me this opportunity to present you with my ideas for a TV serial drama. I absolutely agree that the genre is as popular as ever, and I think this is primarily due to the conflict and dramatic situations presented to characters we grow to love. And that links me very, very nicely there in that opening paragraph. I'm writing in character, and I'm linking straight onto my first point there. So I'm going to start a new paragraph, relatable characters. So I'm going to write a little bit here about if I just make that a little bit smaller, there we go. There we go. About characters we grow to love. Sorry, there we go. So I'm going to go into a new paragraph now. And they've said relatable characters. Characters who are relatable are a key part of a successful TV serial drama. Audiences are gratified by characters who are familiar but not perfect. So I've taken that bit there about character flaws, and I could say here character flaws are a common element of characters, because it makes them so much more believable. This is evident in what's his name? The guy from House of Cards. It's something I've been watching recently, so it's kind of the first thing that came to mind. Oh no, I'll tell you what, I've been watching 13 Reasons Why. So let's go for, this is evident in Clay's character in 13 Reasons Why. He is clearly the hero as defined by Prop, as his role within the narrative is to bring justice to the people who caused Hannah's death. However, he is not the perfect hero. He has anger issues, and he is volatile. This is also shown in House's character in House MD, a hero character who is rude and obnoxious. So there, guys, what I've done, what I've essentially done there is I've taken that first bit of bullet pointing I've done about character arcs, prop, and flaws, and I've started to kind of like build an answer where I'm really showing that I understand characters, I understand how they work in dramas, I understand, you know, what makes a good character. It's a little bit rushed, as you can imagine. But one thing I've not spoken about there is character arcs. I'm just going to go back and add to this. These characters often undergo a huge change over the course of a season in a character arc. There are 3 types of arc, and the most common is the growth arc. If you don't know what I'm talking about here, I talk about this extensively in part 1 of my video series, all about media language. Feel free to go back and watch that one, because I've talked about growth arc in there, I've talked about props. So if you're not entirely familiar with what I'm actually saying in terms of the content, it's all there. It's all there in part 1 of the video series. There are 3 types of arc, and the most common is the growth arc, which shows a character overcoming some type of issue or inner turmoil. So again, I'm just going to use one of my case studies to back up my point here. So I'm going to say, for example, House from House MD is very antisocial at the start of season 1, but over the course of the first 2 seasons, he develops relationships with the other main characters. Okay? Now, I'm going to stop there, guys. I'm not going to write the full answer, because we've already been going for half an hour and there's an awful lot I want to talk to you about. So, what I've tried to illustrate to you there with that first paragraph is, this is not a test of how well you know your case studies. This is a test of how well you know the conventions of the drama, and how well you can apply case studies to fit your points. So you can see there, guys, I don't even know if you can see it very well. I'm sorry, the quality is a little bit lousy. Can you talk about character arcs and apply your case studies? Can you talk about Vladimir Prop and apply your case studies? That's really what they're interested in. Now, likewise, just like I bullet pointed, if I just go back to my answer here, if I just scroll down a little bit, I've said about unusual situations. So I said familiar characters and unfamiliar situations. For example, in The Walking Dead, we have bus drivers and policemen and shop workers, ordinary people thrown into extreme situations, because we are fascinated as an audience by conflict and how it's going to be resolved. I would talk about that later, where I've said about gripping storylines, and I'd say about how Todorov's narratology theory, where we have equilibrium, disruption, recognition, repair, and new equilibrium, that works not only on an episodic basis but also on a season-wide basis. So I think that's really, really important. And the other thing that I would just say there is I very, very briefly mentioned audiences are gratified. There's a good example of how you're basically talking about uses and gratification theory there, but without having to, extensively go over, like, there are 4 types of use and gratification. They are blah, 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 blah. Because you're going to end up just wasting time by doing that. So have a think about how you're going to use your time. Don't spend more than 20 minutes on this question, because you could write on this one for an hour. And I've already shown you kind of like, how you can really, really get your teeth into this question, which I hope helps. So what shall we do now? Okay, so we've spoken about question 1. I'll tell you what, the pace we're going at, I might stop for a second now. Rather than doing a huge lot of Q&As at the end, I'm just going to go back to the chat stream. And if you have any questions about question 1 specifically, which I've not covered so far, do you want to fire them away? And maybe I'll give you a second to see how what you guys think. How many paragraphs for question 1? Okay, that's a really great question. So there's not really a clear answer to that one. What I would say is you need to spend 20 minutes on this question. You don't really want to spend any more. So what would that equate to? The thing I would say is you absolutely must write about all bullet points. There is no point in writing loads and loads about the first one about character and then kind of ignoring the other 2. You must write about all 3 paragraphs. That's essential. What kind of theories could be used for Stranger Things? Well, I've just shown you a few there. If you talk about characters, you could use prop. You could talk about how people are gratified with a sense of personal identity or social interaction. What structure should we follow? I think you should just follow the bullet points. So make sure you write about each of them. And write a paragraph about characters, try and get as much in there as you can, and then go on to the next one, then go on to the next one. Because there might only be 2 paragraphs. There might only be two bullet points. There might be 4 bullet points. We just don't know. Where are we? I'm most worried about timing for question 1. So much to write in just 20 minutes. Do you have any tips for this? That's a great question. Yeah, it's a tough one. I would say don't make your introduction overly long. Just address Serial Box and make it clear that you're writing to them. When they talk about characters, talk about character arcs, talk about prop, and apply a couple of case studies. But you can't waste too much time on this. Can you mention use intertextuality to create nostalgia for the audience? Definitely, absolutely. Listen, the things I'm talking about are the things that I've studied with my students. So we've studied prop, uses and gratification, character arcs, story arcs, narratology. Those are the things that we've done. I've not really talked an awful lot to my students about intertextuality, but if you have, most definitely do, because that is a great example of your media understanding. I did a mock with my students a couple of months ago, probably now, and what I found was, and they've improved on this, is they were very good at writing about their shows and about writing about shows as non-experts. And you've been studying media studies to become experts, so don't completely forget about narratology and don't forget about use and gratification. Show that you are an expert and have confidence in yourself that you are an expert in TV dramas. Pretend this is a real pitch. Forget about the exam. Pretend this is a pitch where someone is trying to buy your show. How are you going to convince them that you're the right person and you actually understand the genre? That's what this is all about. How do you talk about appeal to the audience? I think uses and gratification is the important one there. Uses and gratification theory, and there's a video on my channel about this if you're not too familiar with it, is literally how our audience is gratified by the media. So, in my opinion, let's look at them. So there's four use and gratifications: information, personal identity, social interaction, and entertainment. Information, do you learn anything from TV dramas? Not really. Fine, you could say, well, I learned the storyline and I learned what happens and stuff like that. That's not learning. That's when they say information, they're talking about kind of like you read a newspaper to find out information. So you don't really get information. That's not how you're gratified. What about social interaction? Definitely. Social interaction in so much as you get to know characters and you grow to love them. You almost become friends with the people in TV dramas. Personal identity, yes, you might identify with a certain type of character. You might kind of really identify with the hero, so you get a sense of personal identity. And entertainment, obviously, of course you get entertained. That's the whole purpose of them, really. I've seen a couple comments about who is prop, what's narratology, who's Todorov. I talk about all of this in part 1 of the video series, so if you aren't sure, watch those videos. They're only about 10 minutes each, guys, so between now and Monday, it'd probably be a really good idea to do that. I'm not going to answer any more questions about question 1 for now. I want to talk about question 2 for a minute. So let me just go back to my questions. So, where are we? I've written as a potential question 2 in terms of how it might possibly look. I've said, give us your ideas for your TV serial drama. Make sure you include an outline of the setting for the show, a description of the main characters, an explanation of how the show will appeal to teenage audiences. Now, where we've been talking about dramas as a whole so far, this is where it becomes very specific as to the teenage audience. So, I've just seen one person there asking what theory is escapism part of. Escapism is part of entertainment, of use and gratification. So if there's 4 uses and gratification, escapism comes into entertainment. Anyway, as we're saying, let's have a go at writing a pitch. So I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff that I've just written. And how are we going to go about doing this? So I think the important thing with your pitch is that you give a flavour of your show without giving too much detail. Now I say this because, again, when I've done this with my students, very often their ideas are fantastic. They're so good and they get so caught up with the idea it becomes like, and there's a character called Bartok from the kingdom of Maleficent, but he is sister to this person, and then one day he goes to town and he finds a giant cat who takes him away. It's like, whoa, you're giving me a full breakdown of exactly what happens. That's too much detail. What you need to do is almost paint the big picture. So let me give you an example. What other shows have I watched lately? Okay, 13 Reasons Why. I'm only talking about that one because it's one that I've watched recently. You could talk about 13 Reasons Why and make it overly complicated. So there was this guy called Clay and he was really good friends with Hannah and they were really good friends, but she had lots of things going on for her in her life and some people bullied her, but she really liked this other guy called Justin, but Justin kind of cheated on her and then she felt really sad, so she recorded these tapes. That is not what you want to do with this question, and it's a quick way to confuse the person reading it and lose an awful lot of marks and waste a lot of time as well. So how would we pitch 13 Reasons Why? I would personally say my show is based in modern day America and follows the story of a young man who has recently lost his best friend after she committed suicide. He's trying to uncover a mystery as she left 13 tapes giving 13 reasons as to why she decided to make this decision. And each episode follows his listening to one of these tapes. So can you see the difference there? You are not saying exactly what happens. You're painting a picture of the overall story. So let's come up with an idea. I was thinking about this earlier because I realised when I get to question 2, I'm going to have to kind of like come up with an idea. Now, what do we know? Let's go back to the preliminary materials. I've got that here somewhere. Let's go back to the preliminaries. What do we know? They want something that's going to appeal to teenagers. They want something that's not going to just use the same old stereotypical representations of young people. They want something that's current. It's going to appeal to teenagers and not be stereotypical. So I was thinking about this earlier, just so I can have something to write about now. And I was thinking about, what about a show based in a hospital, so it's a hospital drama, but the main characters are teenagers on a kind of like a serious injury or extreme care unit. So it would be following kind of like various people who get brought in, and we get to know their story through the main character who is in there a long time. Perhaps he's in there having cancer treatment or something like that. And that's really interesting because there straight away we're using non-stereotypical characters or ones that aren't represented very often in the media. People undergoing, treatment, people who are seriously ill. And I think that would be a really interesting take. So how am I going to actually write this? I'm going to start off with a very, very short introduction. Again, don't waste too much time on this. And I'm just going to say, this first paragraph, I'm going to try and get my idea across in a nutshell. My idea for a TV serial drama is one which I think is truly unique and will appeal to, hang on, let me just get this across, appeal to teenage audiences as it features unusual, I think I've already used unusual, relatable characters who are not just stereotypes of the types of teenagers we see in most modern dramas. Nice, really, really short. I haven't wasted much time. Nice, to the point, first paragraph. My show is called... Oh, God, I haven't thought this far. I have no idea. I don't want to waste time. My show is called The Ward. There you go. My show is called The Ward, and follows a teenage boy who is undergoing treatment for cancer in a hospital. This is again, they've asked for any subgenre. Make it clear what your genre is. This is a new take on the hospital drama. Hospital drama, where we aren't actually focused primarily on the doctors, but a long-term patient who befriends and gets to know other visitors and patients to the ward. That's my idea in a nutshell. Again, I've not gone into too much detail, but I feel like I've articulated an idea here of kind of the world I want to build. Now, let's look back at the question. So what did it say? An outline of the setting for the show. I've kind of started on that one, but I could now go on to talk a little bit more about what the ward would look like. Now, at this point, I would remind you that you are really, really open to display your answer however you want. You might want to do it as a straight-up essay, and that is fine. You might want to do a little sketch of the ward, bearing in mind that's primarily, in this particular show of mine, that's where almost everything happens. This one room, which feels almost a little bit claustrophobic. You might want to draw that. You might not. You might want to sketch. You might want to bullet point it. Now I'm just gonna have a quick go at describing my ward. So I'm gonna say the show takes place almost entirely on the ward, which gives the audience a sense of, oh God, how do you spell claustrophobia? There you go. Which gives audiences a sense of, oh, I thought I had it right. No, I didn't. Gives audiences a sense of claustrophobia. I imagine the ward to have a very sterile blue tint to it, which again is rather uncomfortable, and allows the audience to really feel for the main character as he is in a situation which is incredibly challenging. Again, I'd be very much thinking about time now, and it's like 20 minutes per question. I'd be thinking like I've got to start moving on now. So again, I would now talk about description of the main characters. I'm not going to write it for you just now, but I would say about how my main character is, and have a think about this. It's just a name, and you could just pick Mike or Tim or Billy. It doesn't really matter. But actually, every single decision you make, from like, you know, what the ward looks like to what your character's called to what they look like, that's creating representation. That's using media language. So what could we call our character? Could he be called Achilles? Again, it's a very unusual name, but think about the connotations there. My main character is called Achilles because he's incredibly strong. But if you think about Achilles in terms of Greek mythology, that's where the term Achilles' heel comes from. You know, he's got this this huge challenge that he's overcoming. But he is actually, his spirit is very, very strong, and Achilles kind of represents that. You could write that, and in one situation where you could have written his name is Timmy and moved on and not gotten any marks, here you're showing intent and you're showing creativity. And I think that's really indicative of what to do. What does he look like? We could say on the very, very first episode, he started to lose his hair from chemotherapy. And he's very, very glum. He's very, very down in the dumps. I know I'm kind of skipping ahead here to the story part in the next one. But actually think about maybe the character arc that Achilles would go on. Perhaps where he's very bitter and he's angry at the world and he's angry that he's got cancer. What about over the course of the season and he gets to meet other characters? One who's just broken a leg. One who's got you know, a terminal illness. One who's got you know, a brain tumor. You know, maybe his character arc is he goes on a journey over the course of the first season by meeting all of these people where, you know, he grows to accept his cancer, something like that. I'm just thinking again about what's not stereotypical and what might be interesting to a teenager, and what situations are going to be dramatic. What's going to be gripping for the audience? So that's kind of what I do for question 2, guys. I'm so aware of the time, so I'm afraid I'm not going to write any more for that one. Next up is question 3. Now, I'm not going to draw for you what I think you should do, but I am going to I'm going to kind of give you some pointers as to what you should do based on what comes up. So, question 3 is the production question, and the things that could come up, I think, based on the preliminary materials, I think it very possibly could be a storyboard question. They've said about marketing materials in there quite a few times. So I wouldn't be surprised if you would be asked to storyboard a trailer. You could be asked to storyboard the title sequence. You might be asked to storyboard the first couple of minutes. I'm not sure. But if you are asked to do a storyboard, those are the ones that I think would most likely come up. Okay, so how do you actually draw a storyboard? Hopefully this is something that you've studied in your lessons. Certainly as I've studied this, my guys. But what I would remind you is to make your storyboards easy to understand for whoever's reading them. Now again, it's so easy. It's so easy to draw a storyboard that makes sense to you, but not necessarily to other people reading it. In other words, great if you can say extreme close-up, wide shot, and you show in reasonably well done drawings what your ideas are. But those little boxes for text to the side are just as important, if not more so. So make it absolutely clear what's happening and actually describe the scene, what's happening. Use the correct media terminology. So like I said, talk about the camera movement, the camera angle, the lighting, the shot transition. It's all laid out. So you'll get a template where it'll have a little box for you to draw in, a little box for dialogue and sound, a little box for timings. Don't ignore those. They're literally asking you to fill them in. and justify what you do. Like I said earlier, don't be afraid to add colour. In fact, I'd encourage you to add colour because that could really, really help. What else could come up for question 3? I really wouldn't be surprised if it's not a storyboard. Like, storyboard almost is the most obvious one, I think. But think about how much they spoke about the digital marketing campaign in that last paragraph of the preliminary materials. It's very, very possible, especially since last year's exam they asked you to do a storyboard, it's very possible they'll ask you to design a game or a mobile app or a website. And again, what they're asking for in question 3, what they're looking for is your creativity, your ability to use media language to create something which is going to appeal to a teenage audience. And yeah, your use of media language. So if you're designing a website, first off, does it look like a website? Are you familiar with the conventions of a website in terms of there must be a navigation bar at the top? What kind of colors would you use? Are things written in columns? What kind of imagery would you use? And if you get a question like this, I really would recommend annotating it. So if you've decided that the top half of your web page is going to be black and it slowly fades as you go down, annotate the black area and actually say about how the black could connote the mystery because you're doing a crime drama. If you have drawn one of your main characters in the kind of like the title, annotate them as to like their body language. Why are they looking over their shoulder? Is it kind of like, again, to show the mystery or something? You're really trying to show off your ability to manipulate media language to create meaning here. I don't think there's an awful lot here to say other than, in preparation for this question, I would highly, highly recommend that you consider what your trailer would look like, consider what your title sequence would look like, consider what your website might look like, so that whatever comes up, you're not just starting blind, you've got an idea, okay? We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to quickly talk to you about question 4 now. Now, this is one that I've written. And I've said... Now explain... Oh, it's very, very small. Now explain 3 ways you will use digital media to promote your show in pre-release marketing campaign. Again, this is something that you might want to do as an essay. It's something that you might want to literally do as 3 extended bullet points. Again, when I was speaking to the examiner a little while ago, she actually told me how some people in the past have done incredibly well doing mind maps. You can literally mind map your answer with 3 different stems, giving ideas as to what your ideas are. So, 3 digital marketing ideas. If you simply say trailer, that's not going to get you many marks. If you say something old school like a radio advert or a billboard, that most definitely is not going to get you many marks. What they're asking for here is integration into social media, being online, the fact that everyone's on their phones, the fact that you are going to probably hear about new TV dramas through things like Twitter and Snapchat. So have a think about how you would use these different devices. And again, you can do a lame version of this. You can say, well, I'd use Twitter and I would use the hashtag coming soon. That's a really lame use of a digital marketing tool. So some of the case studies I've looked at with my students are things like Game of Thrones had a really, really cool hashtag. They had one called Roast Joffrey. Joffrey's obviously like the big bad guy from the early seasons of Game of Thrones. And by having this really cool hashtag, Roast Joffrey, people were using it to kind of like talk about how much they hated this character. And the more hashtag gets used, the more it goes trending and the more people are exposed to your idea. So, I mean, I've not really thought about this. How could you... Let's go back to my idea about the one about the ward. How could I use digital marketing to try and get people excited about this new show? Well, what about if we had a hashtag my story, where people who are currently in hospital undergoing treatment for serious illnesses, they could actually share kind of like, you know, what's going on in your life right now, my story. And they're actually kind of like, they can send a picture or they can actually say like, you know, here's me in a real ward. that's a really cool thing that there's always people in hospital. There's always people who want to share these stories. It creates a sense of community, and it could get people talking about it. That's a really good use of Twitter and a hashtag. What other things can you do? There was a great one for Stranger Things where they actually they did a deal with either Facebook or Snapchat. I can't remember who now, but when you're in the camera mode where you can actually have augmented reality and you can actually have something appear on your face, they actually had the little demon, the little demigorgon called Dart, appear on your head whenever you're using Snapchat. That's a really, really cool way of doing it. Another one they did, and I think I put this in one of the videos, is the fact that they had Feed Dart, which was a website where you could literally start feeding this character. There was another one done for Pretty Little Liars, and that was a really good one where, obviously this is a murder mystery, they had a working website where you could kind of like look at clues and start working out exactly who you thought it was. 13 Reasons Why. I don't think they did this, but they could have released online, they could have released audio recordings of Hannah's entire tapes, and you could almost listen along as an audience and feel like you're involved. These are ideas of using digital media really, really well. I'm just going to scroll back. I'm not entirely reading comments, but Hazel just said you could have posted in the cancer ward in a hospital. That's a great idea. That is a great idea, but an easy trap to fall into. That's not digital marketing. So that's a trap that I don't want any of you to fall into. Posters, that's not digital. Billboards, that's not digital. I mean, you could have that hashtag, and by all means that would appear on posters and in trailers and stuff like that. But I think what they're really looking for is things that market your show online. So think about the different things that you as an audience actually use. You use YouTube. You use Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and stuff like that. Think about games that you use. What could you do to promote your show? I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Fortnite, which everyone's playing at the minute on their phones, Fortnite recently had Thanos from the Avengers in it. Now that's a great idea in terms of synergy, where you could actually use an element from your show in something online, which is already very, very popular, to promote your show. These are the kind of things you need to be talking about for question 4. Okay, it's nearly been an hour now, guys. And I've just seen a couple of questions. I'm going to start answering questions now. Someone has just said, can you use... oh, it's going so fast, I've kind of lost it. Can you use QR codes? Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, how you use the QR code, I think, is what would be interesting. Don't just say, well, I'd market it using a QR code. What about if you use the QR code in a really unusual place? Like, you could put QR codes all over London. Or, if you were doing a prison drama, what if you hid QR codes on kind of like the HR prison signs, HM prison signs? Nah, that's a lame idea. But anyway, I think that's a great idea. Can we mention posters if it mentions campaign? For example, competition promoted on posters, but also websites? Yeah, I guess so. If you talk about how your poster would be digital, then definitely. Really, really great example that someone was telling me about recently was a poster which kind of featured augmented reality. So posters were put up around the city, and if you point your phone at them, you could almost see like the main character's face change to something else. That's a great example of digital marketing, because it's not just a poster, it's an interactive poster. Okay, Swaggermuffin said, so you could have a mobile or online game, YouTube adverts. Yes, exactly, stuff like that. Should I use press conferences for promotion, or is that not digital? Maggie Chan, I would say personally, if I was marketing, that's not digital unless you put a digital edge on it. So how could you make that digital? I don't think that would be digital myself. I mean, you could live stream it, I guess, but it's not really what we're looking for, I think. Where are we? Broadcast in Times Square, yeah, that works. Okay, Alice Kim, question 2. How would you justify having stereotypical representations when they're specifically asked for realistic representations? Because essentially mainstreamers respond well to stereotypes. That's a really, really good point. That's a really good point. And if you actually wrote that in, it shows your understanding and knowledge of, mainstreamers and your understanding of stereotypes. I think what they're saying is they don't want to see things that they've seen 100 times before. So if it's just a case of like the hot football guy trying to win the cheerleader while the geeky guy with the glasses and the thick curly hair studies but never gets the girl, those are stereotypes, and we have literally seen that since like the 40s. So I think it's not so much modern stereotypes, it's more a case of like, unique characters. I think that's really, really important. Interactive websites, yes, that most definitely works. Would you count pre-launch merch hosted online as digital marketing? That's a good question. Arguably, pre-launch merch wouldn't really work for a new show. Do you know what I mean? So if you released loads of Stranger Things merchandise before it was a big hit, no one would have bought it. Merchandise usually takes off once something is a hit. So now you can get Stranger Things hats, key rings, all sorts. I'm not sure that would really work in a pre-sense. Do you know what I mean? Let's go. Can you just say Snapchat filter, or is that too vague? I would say it's definitely too vague. If I was trying to market The Walking Dead, I would say I would like to market my show by having a specific Snapchat filter which would allow audiences to see themselves slowly turning into a zombie. They would also be encouraged to post a photo of this under the hashtag #ZombieMe or something like that. That's showing an understanding of digital marketing, and it's more specific. If you just said Snapchat filter, that's kind of like, okay, like what, it gives you lipstick or something? Be really specific. Do you have to respond in role to every question, Matt? Yes, you do. Do we need to make a logo for the cereal box if it's a website? No, because think about if you go to like the website for Stranger Things, let's say, that's a Netflix show, and the biggest thing on the website isn't Netflix. That will just feature at the bottom in the institutional information. It'll say a Netflix production or something like that. You would more likely be expected to come up with a logo, like a masthead for your show. So for me, the Ward. And how would I have it look? Well, maybe I'd have the W of Ward looking a bit like, the lifeline thing of a heart monitor. So again, that's me using media language to try and create meaning. Where are we? Okay, that's an interesting one from Gideon. Is it better to go for broad appeal or hyper-targeting certain teens? I would argue you can argue it. I would argue you can kind of like use either there. All they've said in the preliminary materials is they want you to target. Teenagers. Now, if you wanted to, you could perhaps say, I am going to target, teenage girls from inner London. And that's a very, very specific target audience. But if your show fits that audience, I think that works. I don't know. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking like it does need a broad appeal. Something that is going to appeal to a broad teenage audience. And I suppose I would argue your show, whatever that is, should really feature someone that appeals to a broad range of teenagers. So, for example, my idea, The Ward, okay? I've got this main character who would be, let's say, a white male from inner London, let's say. But that doesn't mean that every episode, when new characters come into the Ward, I might represent, different ethnicities, different faiths, different genders, different sexualities. So actually, I'm trying to target as many teenagers as I can. I don't want to be too hyper-focused. Let's go. I'm sorry I can't answer all of these questions, guys. I'm just randomly picking out ones here and there. How would you answer a question on industry? Don't worry, you're not going to get one as vague as that. Question 4 is where you're most likely to get the industry question, and I think it's going to be about marketing. If you get an industry question, they will be more specific than just talk about it. Okay, Ben said, As a question 4 strategy, could you use an online competition for users to have a chance to win free merch? Definitely yes, Ben. I think that's a good idea. I think the way to get marks, if you're going to go down that angle, would be what is the competition and what makes it unique. So could you say we want you to Snapchat yourself in the scariest place you can for a horror show? If it's just a case of like enter your name and your email address and you could win merch, that's a bit of a lame idea. But if you can come up with a really interesting competition, I think that's far, far better. I'm sorry I can't answer these questions, all of them, guys. Can question 2 be bullet points with headers or strictly continuous prose? Guys, they can all, well, I say all. The pitch can be written with bullet points. So once you've kind of given the outline for your idea, if you want to, you can describe your characters with just bullet points. I've even seen it done in the past where people have actually done a very basic sketch of their character and written a profile next to them, like they've annotated it. That's fine. Sri Sri, will a 360 video work? A video be a good idea? That's a great idea. Think about what technologies are really big at the moment. Mobile games, augmented reality, virtual reality. If you can do something with modern technology for your digital marketing campaign, that would be awesome. Think about Spider-Man Homecoming. They actually released like a trailer kind of demo thing where you could actually, if you have a VR headset, you could actually go flying around New York as Spider-Man. What an amazing example of digital marketing. Let me see. I'm going to answer 3 more questions. Okay, Jamie, how would you use prop in your writing? For your case studies, just to take a couple of props character types, let's say the hero, the villain, and the princess, you should be able to identify which character fits that role. So the hero is usually the person who's trying to repair the disruption. The princess is usually someone that needs rescuing. Just because they're called the princess doesn't mean that they are a a girl. The male character could be a princess. So in Stranger Things, I've argued that Will Byers is actually the princess. So that's how I would use it, probably in question 1. You could also use it in question 2, don't forget, because when you're describing your character, so going back to my example when I spoke about Achilles in the ward, I would say about how this character would usually fit the role of the hero, because over the course of each episode, he tries to help the other people who are frightened, scared, unsure about being in hospital, stuff like that. I don't know. Okay, I'll answer 2 more questions. Okay, Vicky Waters, I think this is really important. Do you have examples of all the questions? That's not what I thought you were going to ask. Yeah, if you look to the side right now, these are questions that I've come up with, which I think are kind of representative of kind of what to expect. Okay, Mish X, could you use a hybrid of subgenres? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. In fact, that's a really great idea. Why don't you have a sci-fi hospital drama or a sci-fi crime drama? I think hybrids are a great way to go because again, it's progressing the genre and it's going to make your idea truly unique. I don't want to scare anyone who has just come up with a generic college-based drama where it's about kind of like a group of friends at college and the goings on and the way they hate homework and stuff like that. I don't want to worry you, but that is actually quite generic. If you have actually decided you're going to be making a drama based in a college, I would certainly, before Monday, start considering how you can make that a bit more unique. So could it be a case of it's a college where all of the teachers are zombies, and actually this is a zombie school lock-in? Or could it be a sci-fi college show, a little bit like Ender's Game, where actually we're looking at the traditional college model, but way in the future? And how that affects things. I think if you're just going to do a new version of like Grange Hill or like, standard college drama, that's not going to do too well, I don't think. I'm going to answer 1 more question, guys. I'm afraid I'm going to have to call it after that. Matt, yes, you will be able to watch this live stream straight after. What is a good one to do? Okay, Pippa, are we limited to only 2 case studies for question 1? I don't think so. I think they want to see a minimum of 2, but actually you might want to refer to more than just 2. So when I was writing my question 1 earlier in this stream, I think I referred to house and a couple of others. If you have a case study that comes to mind that actually fits something, feel free to use it. I don't think that's a problem. Question 1. Do you have to use both case studies for each bullet point it mentions? Yes, preferably you would. But again, don't worry, that's not such a big deal, because if you're saying about how, well, if your point was characters undergo character arcs, for example, character 1 does this, whereas character 2 does this. So actually, it doesn't need to add an awful lot of words to your answer, because time is such a big problem with this exam. It's all about time. That really is the hardest thing about this exam is timings, without question. Let me just keep having a look. One more question. Ben! Oh, hi, Ben Moran. Hi. Should we do an introductory paragraph on every question? So I would personally say yes. It doesn't take long. It can be a single sentence. It can just be a case of, for example, question 4. A pre-release marketing campaign is hugely important. And here are my ideas which I think will appeal to the audience because. So that doesn't take too long, and I think it just shows that you're answering in role. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. I hope you found this useful. You'll be able to rewatch this stream if you want to after I go offline. But ultimately, if I was in your shoes now, the exam's on Monday, I would want to be very, very clear on my idea, on my characters. And I would have wanted you to consider the trailer, the title sequence, the story arcs, the character arcs, all of the things that we've spoken about. I'd want you to kind of know what those things are. If you want to practice, I would recommend perhaps look at the questions that I've written, which are indicative of the kind of things that are going to come up on Monday. Have a go at writing them. Time yourself. That's one of the best things you can do. Time yourself and write for 20 minutes. And just see how you do, and realize like where can you shave time off by, like, streamlining here and there. I'm gonna call it there, guys. Very, very good luck on Monday. For any of my class who I hope are all watching, I've seen Ben on there already. I'm gonna hopefully catch up with you on Monday morning, and we're gonna talk about this before you go into the exam. But you'll be fine. Any of my guys, feel free to email me with questions, and I will see you on Monday. Good luck, guys.